Tonight we're down in chapter 6 of the book of Revelation. And here's where we're coming across those four horsemen that is so famous throughout the world. Everybody knows that there's four horsemen in the book of Revelation. And everybody, I guess, has their own idea of what these four horsemen are. Movies are made on it and so forth. But now we have come into this particular part of our lesson here tonight. So in chapter 6, we're going to be talking about them. Now let me call your attention once again, without showing you on the charts as we have, that the book of Revelation is speaking to us in sign language. Jesus Christ said, I will show you what is going to come to pass. He didn't say, I will tell you. I will explain it to you. He said, I will show you what is going to come to pass. In chapter 1, he then showed us Jesus Christ in all of his grandeur and in all of his glory. John describes and shows us about that. In chapters 2 and 3, he writes a letter to the churches, and he tells them what they need to do. Then in chapters 4 and 5 that we have been studying, we have what is called the throne scene. In chapter 4, John says the heavens were open, and John was invited to come up and see what is up there in the heavens. So he then got to go into the heavens, and he looked, and the first thing he saw was this great, almighty, magnificent throne of God. And then God had this book in his hand. A book at that time, remember, was a roll. It was a scroll, and it had 7 seals that were closing it up. And in this scroll contains the destiny of man. In here, God has written down what is going to happen to mankind. And so then the cry came out, who is worthy to open this book? And nobody in heaven or on earth was worthy to do it. Nobody had the power to walk up to God and say, give me the book, you have it written down, I will take it, and I will see that these things happen the way they're supposed to happen. And so John started to cry because he thought that he would never get to see it. Then an angel told him, he said, don't weep, because the Lamb over here is going to do this, or Jesus is going to do it. He turned around and he saw a lamb as though it had been slain. And then a minute he turned around, and that lamb now was a lion. And so here it is, you have Jesus Christ who is the lamb and Jesus Christ who is the lion. And he walks up and takes the book out of the hand of God. And he now is ready to open the 7 seals to show us what's going to happen. That's where we start in chapter 6 tonight, is where Jesus now is getting ready to take off the first seal, and he will show it. Now when he takes off this first seal, here is where we're going to be introduced to these 4 horsemen. They're going to be coming out one at a time. Now let me kind of give you an overview of what we're going to be looking at, rather than to try to hold us in great suspense and look at each one of them and then try to put it together. Here, the first thing that you're going to see in this play is the curtains go up, and here comes the white horse rushing through. And he's coming through, and he conquers. He's victorious. Now, we'll see that this is talking about Jesus Christ, as on down in chapter 19, it identifies him down there. Then, we're going to see that a red horse then comes on. Now this red horse is a blood-colored horse going to represent the shedding of blood. Now when the gospel was preached, the apostles went out and preached the gospel. Their blood was shed. All of them died. Christians died at that time because of preaching the gospel. Then there's going to be a famine. And this is where God is going to bring a famine upon the earth as a punishment. And then there's going to be death by 4 different ways. Now, here it is. You have these things that's going to happen. So here's the introduction. Think about it in this way. Now, I want to put it together. I want you to see this as we start with. When John wrote the book of Revelation, he didn't just write a bunch of conglomerations and slap them together. This means that, and that means that, and just putting things together. There's a story here. And as we look at this story, what we're going to find out is that these 4 seals are going to represent these 4 horsemen, and they show the sufferings of Christians. Christians are going to have to suffer. Now keep in mind the overall view of the book is about the battle between Jesus and Satan, or on this earth, it's the Roman government and the kingdom of Jesus Christ. And so who is going to win the battle? Well, Christians are going to have to suffer. Now, when we open the fifth seal, then we're going to see these Christians who have suffered, they're going to be crying out for justice. And then the next thing, the sixth seal, will show that justice will be brought about when God tells us He will destroy Rome. Now, if you have your Bibles with you, I might just call your attention to it and look at it in this way. As you start in chapter 6, verse 1, "And I saw when the Lamb opened one of the seven seals, and I heard one of the four living creatures saying with a voice of thunder, 'Come.' And I saw and behold a white horse." Now then you get down to verse 3, and then here we have another horse. And then verse 5, another horse. And down here, then you finally get down to verse 7, and another horse. So these four horsemen are coming out, showing Christians are going to suffer. Now look in verse 9. "And when He opened the fifth seal, I saw underneath the altar the souls of them that had been slain." Now then, Christians are going to suffer. They're going to die. And those that died are going to be going up to the altar of God. And now they're going to cry out to God, "Oh God, when are you going to bring justice?" Then in verse 12, "And I saw when He opened the sixth seal, and there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black, and tragedy, disaster comes to pass." Rome is going to fall. So chapter 6 is a chapter that makes sense when we put it all together. Now with this, let's go back now and start in with verse 1, and we'll try to identify each one of these things. "Then I saw, and when the Lamb broke open one of the seals, and I heard one of the four living creatures saying, as a voice of thunder, 'Come.'" Now, as He's opening these seals, remember, this is revealing the providence of God in the life of men. This is where God is telling us, here is what is going to happen. We can compare this to such things as Assyria in Isaiah 10. You remember there, God told Isaiah, He said, "Now I'm going to send this nation down, and this nation's going to do this, and then it's going to do that." And God told what He was going to have done. Now then, Jesus opens up this first seal, and He's getting ready to tell us now what is going to be. So I looked up, and I saw this white horse. Now, when you get to thinking about a horse, in the Old Testament, the horse was the symbol for war. Proverbs 21:31, "A horse for the day of battle, a horse charging into battle, a majestic horse in battle." Horses were the most powerful warring machine known to man at that time. God forbade Israel to have horses. He said, "I don't want you to depend on your battle machines for your protection, because I will take care of you." But the Assyrians, the Chaldeans, they had trained these horses, and they had coated these horses, and so that they would literally run over human beings. If they could find people in the streets, they loved to run over them and trod them down. And a horse was a fighting machine, very swift fighting machine, one you couldn't stand against. Now, in the Bible, the white represents purity. Here He comes out on this white horse. We read about white robes in the book of Revelation. Now, Christ is going to be on a white horse when He wages war in chapter 19 and verse 11. There's an army in heaven, and this army is on white horses. So here it is. We have the warring machine, and we have this purity. And so see that it's Christ that is coming out on this, as He set up on this horse here then, and coming out, and He's going to be victorious in here that we can see. Now, I put this up because others think different things. Now, I'm not going to pay much attention about what others think, because you can get into any commentary you want to, and you can find anything under the sun. Some people say this white horse represents the Roman Empire. The others say it represents the Parthians. Some say it represents Satan. Some say it's a false Christ. Others say it's the Holy Spirit coming. Others say it's an angel riding. And then a lot of people today say it's some coming world dictator that's coming in the future to conquer the world and to be the great Antichrist. And so you look at all of these things and you say, well, what is it? All right, here's the only thing that I can tell you. That I can go to the book of Revelation and there I can find somebody riding a white horse. And it's identifying him and saying it is Jesus Christ. And he's coming forth to conquer. And of course, Jesus Christ did come forth to conquer. You can't find anything else that's in there as far as the Bible is concerned. The only thing it would be is pure speculation. So we're looking here now that here comes Christ on this white horse, and he had a bow, which is a weapon of God, in his hand. Now again, I put these up because time will not permit us to go and look at each one of these, and if we did, we would lose our thought. That if you saw right now, say, now we're going to talk to you in figurative language, in symbolism, and I say, come on in. And here comes a guy busting in here on a big white horse, and in his hand, he had a big bow. Now, that wouldn't carry the significance to us as it would back in those days. See? Because back in those days, the bow meant something. It was a warring instrument. When it's trying to show how God can do this, he has bent his bow. God has bent his bow. He's getting ready to destroy here in there. And so you find that the bow is a warring instrument. The crown is, there's two Greek words for crown, and this is that Stephanos, which is always a victory crown. So this white rider is coming out to make war, and he's going to be victorious. So the only thing I would know to say is then that he's coming out to conquer, conquering and to conquer, that Christ will rule. Now the way Christ rules, of course, is seen through the gospel. He's sending his apostles out, and they are to be preaching the gospel in that century. Go ye into all the world. And Jesus promises them that he will be with them, and he sent them out, and they did preach it in all of the world. Every person had an opportunity to hear the gospel of Christ. Now, I call your attention to this down here, that this figure that you're seeing here, you have to put back in that day. This picture fits the culture of that day. Now, the people would understand it. They didn't have RPGs and ICBMs and smart bombs dropped by F-16s. Let's suppose that John had said that. He'd had a picture of an RPG out there, ICBM, and on and on. It wouldn't have made sense to them. What is all of this stuff? But a horse with a rider with a bow. He is going out to conquer in war. We find this in history in here, as you can kind of look at that. That here it is that this fellow here in 53 B.C. In the Parthians, he had mounted these archers and had a camel train of extra arrows that the camels brought about. Rome lost with 20,000 people killed, had 10,000 captured because of this bow and so forth. Parthians' clones show all of this. Now Christ is pictured throughout the Old Testament and the New Testament as victorious over his enemies. He's going to crush the enemy nation. He'll break them. He'll waste them. Remember in Daniel 2:44 that we spent a lot of time with, that he will destroy Rome, and then his kingdom will stand forever. So, as I would see it, we're introduced now to Christ. The first thing is the guarantee Jesus Christ is coming to declare war, and he will be victorious. So then you open the second seal. And now then you have this rider coming out on this blood-colored horse, this red horse. And as you look at this, here you can go back to the Old Testament, and these things are not new, as we pointed out, that he's writing to people who are familiar with the Old Testament, and they understand certain things. And God, back in Zechariah, showing about how he would send his forces, whatever they were, I'm going to send my forces through the world, and he had them carrying on here a red and a white and a sorrel horse. And they're going to be going out. So horses are not unfamiliar to it. The 4 chariots were drawn there by red and black and white and spotted horses. So we're already been introduced to this in the Old Testament in there. So it evidently in that time, spirit writers were writing. Here, war is coming that is in here. Bloodshed is going to be there. Now, he's coming to slay. The word slay means to kill or butcher. It's kind of a rather harsh term. It's referring to the cutting of the throat, to the killing of the sacrifices. It's what Cain did to Abel, and the beast here did in the slaying and so forth, in all of that. There was given unto him a great sword. So he had this great sword to go out and declare this war. Means long or so forth. So it's a picture here of this white horse goes off the stage. Here Christ comes along and conquers. What's the next thing? Here comes a red horse. Blood is going to be shed that's in here by this. There's nothing we can do to stop it in here because there's going to be this bloodshed that is here. Well, the meaning, as far as I can see, then, would probably mean this. As I go back to the Bible and take a look at what really happened, it probably refers to the persecution of the saints, which had been promised by Jesus. Remember when Jesus was here, what he promised? So oftentimes we forget the real promises Jesus made. Now, he promised us that we can find answers to life and a lot of these things. But he also promised them, he said, I didn't come to bring peace, I came to bring a sword. And there's going to be problems. And he talked about the civil governments and how the courts would deliver them up to kill them. How some of their own family members would deliver them up to have them killed. Bloodshed followed the preaching of the gospel. In the first century period of time, you didn't just have a loving, peaceful period of where they went out and preached the gospel, thousands were converted, and everybody lived happily ever after. No, they went out and preached the gospel, and then they were killed for their preaching. They were captured. They were killed. They had their heads cut off. They paid the price. Not only the apostles, but the others that lived at that time. We hear that famous story about Polycarp and how it was at 86 years of age. They brought him up to kill him because he was a Christian. They had a man of influence that came up and said, if you will just renounce Jesus or you'll just sprinkle to the Roman government, I can get you out of here and you won't have to die. And he made the statement, 86 years have I served him and he's never failed me yet. And he told them to light the fire. They did. They burned him to death. Now, people died at that time. It wasn't just a peaceful thing. When the gospel went forth, it went forth under this great persecution. So now the first 2 horses, keep in mind. Here we have the gospel that's going out to be preached. Bloodshed is going to follow. That's what we've learned so far. Now we come to the 3rd horse. When he broke the 3rd seal, I heard the 3rd living creature saying, come. I looked and behold a black horse, and he who sat on it had a pair of scales in his hand. Those scales are important. Now black would represent famine or economic hard times, and those scales would represent that. In the Old Testament, let me say this, that is talked about God telling Israel and Judah, times are going to get so rough that you're going to eat by measure. You're going to have to weigh it out. You're not going to have the money to buy whatever you want to buy. You're just going to have enough so that you weigh it out for each member of the family getting, and you're just barely going to survive. That's what the idea of scales is that's in here. That it was to ration this out. The scarcity of food in Ezekiel 4 shows this, that it was by measure. That's what the scales indicate in here. Now, a quart of wheat for a denarius, or a shilling. Now, we're told that that was a day's wage, and a quart of wheat was enough for one person for one day. It would be a little less than a quart of our measurement we've got today here. But they say that's what it took for the nourishment to keep one person alive. and then 3 quarts of barley for the same thing. Now, it was cheaper food. But what's a man going to do when he goes out and earns the wages of 1 denarius? Then he goes to the market. Will he buy wheat for himself, or will he buy barley so he can spread it out among his family? And so he said, this is the way that it's going to be, and it'll all be weighed out. It's a time that famine is coming upon you. Now, this is an interesting thing, because again, as we go back to the Old Testament, in Ezekiel, God tells them, he said, now, I want to show you the different things I have to punish you. God is showing them, I can punish you. I can bring you to your knees. And he said, for thus saith the Lord Jehovah, how much more when I send my 4 sore judgments upon Jerusalem, the sword, the famine, the evil beast, and the pestilence, to cut off from it man and beast. So I said, I have these 4 things at my disposal that I'll be sending upon Jerusalem. And one of them was famine. And so God now is saying, I'm going to bring a famine at this time. All right, as we look at this then, we can see here that it also says, and oil and wine hurt thou not. In other words, so much wheat, so much barley. But oil and wine, forget it. Oil and wine were the luxuries. They were the luxurious things that you buy. So what he's saying is, it's going to be such a bad time that you could buy 1 quart of wheat, you could buy 3 quarts of barley, doesn't have much nourishment. As far as oil and wine, don't hurt them. Don't think you're going to use them in any sense. Haley's explanation is, as you see it right there. The latter, the Christian who refused to compromise by sustaining membership in a pagan guile or a union, as in Thyatira, or bow to the emperor's image, as in Pergamum, would be hard-pressed to find work and earn a living. Christians are really going to suffer during this period of time. Now let's look at these first 3. Christians are going to suffer as a result of preaching the gospel. That's what we find in these first 3. Now then the 4th. Then I heard a voice saying, come. I looked, and a pale horse, and he who sat on it had the name Death. So we know what this is. The word pale literally means ashen, and you can see there that Homer, he's one of the old Greek writers, wrote about 800 years before Christ. He uses the same Greek word to talk about ashen, or the look on a person's face when they are totally petrified with fear. That's the idea that it had there. That we'd say they just went white, and that's the word that is there. Now then, with this horse, death and Hades was following after him. Now, all the way through the book of Revelation, where you find death, you find Hades. And the reason for that is when you die, you're going to go to Hades. That's the unseen place of the dead. So here it is. They're riding along. So it's going to be death now at this period of time that is in there. Now, as we see these 4 here about death, how we do it, well, authority was given to them over 1/4 of the earth. Now, I want you to just kind of put that back over here on the right-hand side and clear at the back of your brain, the 4th. Because in a little while, we're going to move to the 3rd. And then in a little while, we'll move to the whole thing. But right now, the 4th. A 4th part of the earth, a small part of the earth, what he's going to use to kill with the sword. That's war, famine, that's starvation, pestilence. That's any kind of diseases that come upon you, or the locusts and things that destroy your crop, earthquakes, storms, various things that destroy your crops, and by the wild beast of the earth that's here. So now a 4th part of the earth is going to be here. Now Ezekiel 14:21, here it is again. We've already looked at this. He says, here's the 4 things that I will use my 4 severe there. Now back in Ezekiel, the 4 judges in Ezekiel was on Jerusalem. Now the 4 judgments are going to come upon the whole earth. So I said, now the whole earth is going to be affected by these things. Now let's put the 4 together. The first 3 are things Christians will suffer. Then along comes death by pestilence and all of these things that God will bring to pass. Now, why does God bring these to pass? God has always done this. From the creation of mankind, He's always punished His nations to try to bring them to their senses by these different ways here. He's caused earthquakes, He's caused famines, He's caused all of this to try to bring people to their knees and let them see, I really don't have power over what is mine. I might be a rich man. I might have gone out and gained a whole lot in the stock market. And so today I'm a rich man. Boy, nobody can touch me. God is going to show me, Lowell, I don't care what you've got, I have ways of taking it away from you. And every American can see that. Now, we're not talking about America now, we're talking about Rome. But back in those days, you could see that. And we can see how God can do that. How long would it take God to just turn our financial system upside down? How long did it take Him to call our attention back in 9/11? How long did it take things to start quivering? Had that happened in Dallas and in LA, what do you suppose would have happened? What would have happened to our financial system? Would it have been shaking? I'm just trying to get you to see there are just so many ways God has that we haven't even thought about it. Laying in bed, not worried, and all of a sudden you get out of bed and what in the world has happened in here? That's what this death is. God said, I will bring this up on the whole Roman world. I'm going to punish them. And of course, when He punishes them, Christians are also going to suffer. So the Christians are going to suffer in these first 4 different things that we've got. Now we come to the 5th seal. Now the 5th seal is not another horseman, but it's a picture of the martyrs in heaven calling for justice. What about all these people now that have been killed? Where are they? Their souls have gone to heaven. They're up there, and they are now under the altar. In a minute, we'll read it verse by verse. But here it is, it says, I saw underneath the altar the souls of them that had been beheaded. They're the martyrs. They're the victims that you have there. In the Old Testament, the blood was poured out at the base of the altar. Life is in the blood, and it was given on the altar. The idea is that here on God's altar in heaven, here are all of these people who have been killed for Him. They've been sacrificed for Him. So try to picture all of these people we talked about, all the apostles, this guy Polycarp, all of the women who've lost their children and they died, all the people who would not renounce Christ, and all the people who were killed. There they are. Their life has been poured out. They've sacrificed their life upon this earth. And now they're under the altar up there with God. And they cried out with a loud voice, How long, O Lord, holy and true, will you refrain from judging and avenging our blood on those who dwell on the earth? So here it is, they've been killed. Now, this gives us a picture of what goes on in heaven. See, these are the people who were killed back in the first century period of time. They were underneath the altar. Their blood had been pulled out. They had been sacrificed. Now they're crying out to God. And their question is, How long, O Lord, holy and true? How long will it be before you, as you refrain from judging and avenging our blood? How long are you going to let those things go on down on earth? How long are you going to permit the people down on earth to have to die and to do all of this? Now, avenging is not a bad term, unscriptural. It's God says, you leave avenging in my hands. The word vengeance or avenging really means justice. That's what it means. What they're asking for, they're saying, Lord, when will you see that justice is done? When will you vindicate us that's down there? When will you right the wrong? That's how Habakkuk started his book. Oh Lord, how long? How long are you going to permit all of this ungodliness to go on? And God then takes the book and He answers him in doing that. I want us to look right now as we start in chapter 6 And I'm going to start reading in verse 9. And when he opened the fifth seal, and I saw underneath the altar the souls of them that had been slain for the word of God and for the testimony which they held. And they cried with a loud voice, saying, How long, O Master, the holy and true, dost thou not judge and avenge our blood on them that dwell on the earth? Now look at what happened. And there was given to each one a white robe. And it was said unto them that they should rest yet for a little time, until their fellow servants also and their brethren, who should be killed even as they were, should have fulfilled their course. So here it is. God now is answering those people that's up there. And what he tells them is, he said, here is your white robe. Here is your heavenly garment for you to use as you're living now in this Hadean world. And I want you to rest. You people have died, been sacrificed down there. Now then, I want you to rest a little while longer. That little while longer, we don't know how long, but we do know how long. It goes ahead and it says, until the number of their fellow servants and their brethren who were to be killed would also be completed. God said, I have a timetable. I know what I'm doing. I know how long I will permit this to go on. It's still going to go on, and there are still people that will be dying down there under this great persecution. Now, you take your white robes and you rest up here in this Hadean world in paradise until I finish the course down there. Until the rest of your brethren who are going to die have died. In other words, to put it in good old American language, I guess, it would be the Lord saying, look, what I'm doing down there, you've already served down there. You have died for me. Now, it's really none of your business how long it's going to be. Your business is, be thou faithful. Remember? You be thou faithful. You were faithful. You've died for me. Now you go ahead and enjoy life up here, and I will see that things are taken care of down there on that earth. So that was the answer that God had given them in there. Then, as we can see these things, so just a little while longer until it happens in here. Now, I want you to notice this. The fifth seal, we've already seen, was not another horseman, but a picture of the martyrs in heaven calling for justice. So you have your four horsemen. The servants are going to be killed. They're in heaven. How long, O Lord? Now then, we're ready to open up the sixth seal. When we open up the sixth seal, now justice is going to come. Justice will come and Rome will fall. So that's where we're going to start now in the 12th verse. And I looked when he broke the sixth seal, and there was a great earthquake. So now the whole earth now is starting to be broken up. Now we're back in prophetic language. We're back in Old Testament language. When God's talking about the fall of Babylon, he likened it to the earth being shaken. God likens it when he says, it's kind of like that he just reaches down, grabs hold of the earth, and just shakes it up. And just everything falls. That nation falls apart. If you can kind of picture it. If God wanted America to fall, he just reaches down, grabs the earth, shakes it, and this nation of America just crumbles. That's what he said about Babylon. That's how he likens this. That's the picture that he's got. All this is picture language that we've got. When the fall of Jerusalem in 586 BC, he pictures it as the quaking. The whole nation was just quaking and falling. This is prophetic language. God on one occasion, Habakkuk, and again in Hebrew said, he said, I will shake all the nations. Now when it comes time to establish his kingdom, I will shake them all. No nation will be able to stand against my kingdom, is what he's saying. So this is not mysterious language. It's language God has always used to show the fall of a nation. And he's talking about the fall of Rome that is in here. And the sun became black, as sackcloth made of hair, and the whole moon became like blood. Now here again, Don't jump and say, oh, this is the end of the earth. It's not the end of the earth. This is the way God has always talked about. Babylon falling, Egypt falling, Israel falling, Judah falling. Nations, when they fell, he put it in this way. Anytime that society is in an upheaval, it's falling, we talk about it being dark days. It's dark days in the history of America when something happens. This is figurative language. Look at the fall of Babylon. The sun will be dark when it rises. That happened back with Babylon. We're not talking about something that literally happened. The sun came up and the sun just turned black. We're talking about when the sun rose over Babylon, Babylon was destroyed. It was a dark day in the history of Babylon. The fall of Egypt. When I extinguish you, I will cover the sun with a cloud. In other words, there's not going to be any sun shine upon Egypt. In the fall of Jerusalem in 70 A.D., the sun will be turned into darkness and the moon into blood. He said, when Jerusalem falls. This is trying to show the heavens, the grandeur of the whole thing, how great that it actually is. Now, I've got several quotes right here. Go through very rapidly. In Babylon, for the stars of heaven and the constellations thereof shall not give their light. The sun shall be darkened its going forth, and the moon shall not cause its light to shine. Again in Babylon, therefore will I make the heavens to tremble, and the earth shall be shaken out of its place. In Jerusalem, I beheld the earth, and lo, it was waste and void, the heavens, and they had no light. I beheld the mountains, and lo, they trembled, and the hills moved to and fro. And Isaiah, I clothe the heavens with blackness and make sackcloth the covering. Talking about the destruction of nations in Matthew 24, destruction of Jerusalem. But immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun shall be dark and the moon not give it light. The stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. It's prophetic language showing when a nation falls, it's totally destroyed, just as though the whole sky collapsed and the whole nation is standing in darkness. He said the sky was split apart and rolled up like a stone in there, like a scroll. That's how he describes Edom. Keep in mind, we've already talked about over 400 references like this are used in the book of Revelation, that you go back to the Old Testament to pull it out to see what it's talking about. Barnes explains it, and he says the reference may be like when there's a big storm and the dark clouds come rolling in, they all roll together and then they pass away. That's what's going to happen to a nation. See? So it's a picturesque thing. Now then you get down to the kings. Still talking about the destruction of Jerusalem. Then the kings of the earth and the great men and the commanders and the rich and the strong and every slave and free man hid themselves in the caves and among the rocks and the mountains. So at this time people are going to run to try to hide themselves. It's universal, from the king to the slave. They hide in caves. Well, there's no secret about what that's talking about. Israel hid in caves back in Judges. Israel hid in caves from the Philistines. David and his men hid in caves to get away from Saul. Obadiah, he hid in caves to get away from Jezebel. And then all of us have seen the picture of Saddam Hussein, haven't we? You see, hiding in caves, scared, petrified, scared to death is the whole picture. Here are two pictures, literal pictures that are taken over there. If you could imagine running and getting into the caves and so forth. They said to the mountains and to the rocks, fall on us and hide us. In other words, hope the rocks fall down. It'd be better to be crushed by a rock than it would be to be killed the way we're going to. They said to the mountains in the destruction of Samaria back in Hosea, and then they will say to the mountains, cover us, and to the hills, fall on us. You see, this, again, is figurative. It's language. It's prophetic language taken from the Old Testament. This is the way he described the fall of Samaria. When Samaria fell back there, it's going to be so bad, you'll run to the mountains and cry for them to fall on you. It's the language denoting awful fear that's there. There is a desire rather to be crushed by falling rocks than to face the vengeance of God. But he's showing that's what's going to happen to Rome. Now, lest we get lost, why does he bring this up? You remember those saints that have been beheaded for Jesus Christ, and underneath the altar they said, "How long, O Lord?" And the Lord told them, "You go ahead and rest up here. I'll take care of it, but I'm going to show you something." And then he gives them the picture of Rome will be destroyed. That's what's going to happen. And then it says, "And for the great day of their wrath is come, and who is able to stand?" God will see that that nation is going to fall. Nahum had the same thing. Who can stand before his indignation? Who can abide in the fierceness of his anger? His wrath is poured forth out like a fire, and the rocks are broken asunder by him. And Amos said, "Therefore thus will I do unto thee, O Israel, and because I will do this unto thee," speaking for God, "prepare to meet thy God, O Israel." Very, very awesome saying. He's showing Israel, "Israel, I've tried everything under the sun to get you to straighten up." He showed them, "I have sent famines. I have sent the locusts to eat your crops. I've sent earthquakes. I've sent other nations to capture you. I have tried every way under the sun to show you that you don't have any power without me. And you won't listen. So there's only one thing left to do. If you're not going to turn your heart to me, then prepare to meet thy God, O Israel." Get ready. I'm going to destroy you. And he did. So we can be assured Rome will fall. Now, as we review this and look at these things, we look at the first 6 seals that we've got. But where's the 7th? That's kind of the mystery right now. Now, as you look at the first 6, they're all in the 6th chapter. But we're not going to come across that 7th seal until we get to chapter 8, verse 1. So chapter 7 will be an interlude. Between this opening the 6th seal and the opening of the 7th seal, we stop the play. Stop the play. Next week, we'll deal with chapter 7. Should you be here tonight and you need to make your heart right with God, would you respond while we stand and while we sing this song?